Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm sorry I am late. I was in a meeting that went well over time. Okay, assuming that we are on, if you are on there and you're hearing me, please send me a message that I know this is being done right. Our technical support team is not here right now. They are out. And so this is all being done with a technically unsavvy me. Is anyone out there? Okay. I don't know. I think we are on. So I will begin. So, all right, this is a little bizarre talking to myself. Oh, yes, Dan is there. Okay, good. I didn't know if I was talking to myself, Dan, but apparently I'm not. I'm talking to you and maybe other people. Again, I apologize for the lateness. We had an unavoidable situation, but right now we are here and ready to roll, okay? So I'm going to open up the Chumash, okay? That is the Bible. And I'm going to open it up to where we got to last time, and we're going to take it from there, okay? Okay, the last thing we got up to was, the last thing we talked about was the splitting of Abraham from Lot. Okay? All right, great. All right, so the last thing we talked about was Abraham has a nephew. His name is Lot, and he is an enigmatic character. I got to tell you. He's a very strange character. Hard to tell if he's a good guy or not a good guy. Okay, from the text, it's not really clear. Let me give you some background who this guy is, and we'll try to understand about him. The name Lot, in the mystical writings, it says it's the word light, which means to be cursed. Okay, Lot, as you know, I just told you from last week's class that when Abraham and Lot went down to Egypt, they came out. Lot said to Abraham, he said, "Listen, I can't be with you. That's it. I'm out of here." And they started having a fight over the sheep because Lot was stealing. He was now having his shepherds muzzle their animals. They were grazing in pastures that were not theirs. Abraham, started rebuking them. And Lot said, "Listen, hey, you know what? Who's going to inherit Abraham? Nobody's got no kids, me. So it's mine." So what happened was Lot separates from him, and then God speaks to Abraham. And the sages tell us that God spoke to him once he separated from Lot, which means Lot was not a good guy. Yet, we're going to see later, in the story of the city called Sodom, where Lot goes, that makes sense. He goes to a place that's not so good, because if he's not so good guy. In the story of the city of Sodom, there was a law in Sodom. The law was you could not do kindness. You could not go and help people. That was their basis. And there was a story that happened that the people saw this woman, this girl, giving bread to a poor person. And they took her clothes off, they put honey all over her, they left her outside until the bees came and stung her to death. The Medrash says, who was this woman? Who was this girl? This was the daughter of Lot. And Lot must have trained his daughter to do kindness. So Lot, on one hand, seems like a good guy. On the other hand, he seems like not so good guy. He runs to the city of Sodom, which is like the most bizarre place. So we're going to learn something very deep right now. Okay? So welcome, everybody. Let me see what I got here. Kenyetta, welcome. And I can't read the other name. That's a Noahide World Center. Magna, welcome. Welcome, everybody. All right. So let's start this week. Now we have to, again, the introduction is that the nephew of Abraham, name is Lot. We see different things about him. Good guy, bad guy, not. That's the question we're going to get to. And from last week's story, we saw that when Abraham went down to Egypt with his wife and with Lot, they came out of there very wealthy, and then Lot started fighting with Abraham, and then Lot went on his own way. He goes to the city of Sodom. Okay. And now in the Bible, we have the story of the First World War. Okay? The First World War was not in the early 1900s. Rather, the First World War is in this story in the Bible. Now, let me explain what happened here. There was a king named Kedar Omer, that was his name, and he had subjugated some other kings that were living in the land of what will future be Israel, and he had subjugated them. They had to pay tax to him. And then these kings living in the land of Israel, we'll call them the 5 kings, they wanted to break away. They didn't want to pay taxes to this guy Kedar Omer. So Kedar Omer took his other friends, 3 other kingdoms, so there was 4 kingdoms, and they came and they made a war against the 5 kings that they had subjugated in the land of Israel, which is not land of Israel, now it's called land of Canaan, but that's the story. Now, why did it happen? If you know the answer, please feel free to say it. So, I guess that's what I just said. The reason why they fought the war was because these guys, the 5 kings, wouldn't pay their taxes, and they wanted to throw the yoke off. And so he attacked and said, listen, I'm in charge and you got to give me the money. That's what it seems to be. And that's what the text seems to indicate. However, there's a deeper reason for this war. And this is brought in the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah, it says in the book of the Zohar, it says the real reason for this war was not the issue of the taxes. That was sort of a political issue. But there was a deeper reason they wanted to come to the land of Israel and fight this war. The reason was they wanted to capture and kill Abraham. Wow. So as we said before, Abraham is having this revolution. And the 4 kings, they have a political reason. The 5 kings in the land of Israel, soon to be called Israel, not yet, in this land, they are, rebelling against us, but their deeper reason was they wanted to get rid of Abraham. That was their real reason. Okay? All right, so fine. That's a very interesting insight. I want to explain that a second to you, because if I asked a student of history, what was the reason for the First World War? Okay, what was the reason? So, you would say what? You would say, because the Treaty of Versailles put Germany in a bad situation, this and that, and all those things would be true. Those are the political reasons. But there was a deeper reason. The deeper reason was the battle that Hitler was trying to have. He was trying to have a battle against the Jewish people because he knew what they represented in the world. Hitler wrote, as I mentioned before, wrote in Mein Kampf, he wrote, the Jews put 2 scars on the world. The scar of the body, called the circumcision, and the scar of the mind, called the conscience. Right? That was his battle. The Jews all of a sudden said, there's morality, you have to do these things. And Hitler was obsessed with fighting that. So what was the real reason of World War II? No, it really wasn't all of the political reasons. That was the backdrop for the issue. But the real core of it was a battle against the Jewish people. And similarly now, even though there are reasons why these 4 kings attacked the 5 kings, political reasons, they're not paying their taxes, they're trying to rebel against us, the deeper reason was they wanted to get Abraham. Okay, fine. Now, according to that, the story is very strange, because here's the story. The story is the 4 kings come down to fight the 5 kings, and they fight, they capture, this and that, and they take Lot. They take Lot, Abraham's nephew, who just separated from Abraham. Now, a refugee from the war, comes and tells Abraham, listen, they've captured your nephew. At that point, Abraham gets some of his people, a small group, and he decides to go fight a war against his four mightiest kings. Crazy. And he goes to retrieve Lot to get him back, and he fights the war with his small ragtag bunch, and they actually beat the four kings. And they retrieve the booty, the spoils, the captives of the five kings that the four kings had taken, and they pursue them and they get them out. A tremendous miracle, but that's the story. Now, what I want to share with you is, in the text it says that when the four kings came down to fight and they started capturing, it says they captured Lot and they decided to leave. They said, okay, we got Lot. Now, that's really weird. Why did they think that because they got Lot, that's it, the war's over? Especially we said that their reasoning was that they were trying to fight against Abraham. So why were they content with Lot? That's the question. Why were they content with Lot? All right? That's my question. And this is going to get a little bit deep now, so let's hang in. It's getting very powerful now. I want to share with you a Kabbalistic idea. It says also in the Zohar, it says, why were they content with Lot? Because he looked like Abraham. His tzura, his form, was like Abraham. Now, that's really weird, because they knew it wasn't Abraham, so you look like him, so what? If they're fighting the war against Abraham, why were they content with conquering Lot and they were going to leave? Abraham. Now you could say, everyone have an idea? David's there, good to see you. So, you guys want to give an answer? Let me repeat the question again. We said the deeper reason for this first world war in history was these four kings wanted to capture and kill Abraham. Okay? They had a political reason. They fought the war. They weren't the five kings were trying to rebel, not pay the taxes. So that was the political reason. The deeper reason was they wanted to get rid of the Abraham person who was starting this revolt of spirituality in the world. So it says in the text, though, once they captured Lot, they were content. They were about to leave. And what happened was, Abraham was informed that his nephew was taken captive, at which point he went and he fought the war, and he miraculously, God helped him to beat the four kings and to retrieve Lot and all of the spoils and the captives. So my question for you, ladies and gentlemen, is that why was he content to take Lot instead of his goal was Abraham? And the Kabbalistic teachings tell us that the thing about Lot was that Lot looks like, or his form was like Abraham. So what? Doesn't help anything. Anyone have any ideas? This is an open question. Dan, you got an idea? Don, you got an idea? Who's got an idea? Okay. So I'll give you an idea. So one answer you could say, which I don't actually, it's not the deeper reason, but one answer maybe you could say is, maybe they felt that if exactly what happened, maybe they felt if they took Lot, then Abraham would come to save him and they can kill Abraham. That's possible. To bait Abraham. Very good, Dan. Very good. So one possible approach is exactly what Dan just said. I just said it for him right before, but that's what Dan's answer was, to bait Abraham. Okay, and that's possible. It's possible they figured, okay, and they were right. He came after him. But, I don't know. I mean, it could be, but, it's a little funny because, you have to really be counting a lot that this guy is going to be that dedicated to risk everything to fight against the four most powerful kings with 318 men. and for his nephew who separated from him and didn't want to see him and was But okay, it's possible. It's possible that they thought that Abraham was such a great person that he would not leave his nephew alone and he wanted to come and defend him. Okay, that's possible. Fine. Now, let's go to another reason. This is a very fascinating reason. When it says in the Kabbalah and the mysticism that Lot looked like Abraham, it's not referring to just his facial features, although that may be true. That's not what it's referring to. There's a nature of a person. You see somebody, you experience something. There's something about them that you subconsciously maybe experience. There was a certain part of Lot that was so much like Abraham that the four kings understood that if they captured Lot, it's tantamount to capturing Abraham. And what is that? What that is that buried deep inside of this guy Lot, who we don't know if he's a good guy and a bad guy. He goes to Sodom. He goes to the worst place in the world. But yet he seems to want to teach his daughters kindness, and it's not. There's buried deep inside of him something that's supposed to come out way, way in the future. Does anyone know what that is? What's buried inside of this person named Lot in the Bible? And the answer is one of the greatest people in history, is his descendant. Who is that? Buried in Lot is going to be the famous convert whose name was Ruth. Ruth is a descendant from Lot. Now, who is Ruth's great-great-great-grandson? King David. King David is the line of the Mashiach. The idea of the Messiah, that's in the Davidic dynasty. So this guy Lot, who is sketchy in a certain sense, he really has buried in him these sparks of holiness that are so powerful that in the future it will be King David from him. The Mashiach, the Messiah himself, will come from Lot. So when the four kings sensed in this guy Lot, whoa, this is a powerful person here. If we kill him, if we take him, we'll be destroying Abraham also. Let's get him out of here. Let's do something. So Lot is tantamount to Abraham because Lot is the extension and the future of the world in the descendant that's buried deep, deep, deep inside of him. King David. Very fascinating. Okay, great. And let me explain to you now whether this guy Lot was a good guy or a bad guy. So I'm going to tell you this. This is fascinating now. The truth is, Lot is a complicated character. He's very ambivalent. There are good things about Lot and bad things about Lot. Before Lot went down to Egypt with Abraham, he was a righteous person. Well, what happened to him in Egypt? What happened was he became very wealthy. And he became very wealthy, so then he came back and said, why do I want to be second fiddle and subservient to Abraham? You know who I am? I'm a hot shot. I'm a big shot. Why do I need him? So Lot, when he was able to receive from Abraham, when he was able to go and say, I subjugate my knowledge to somebody greater, then he was a great person. When he went off was when he became rich and became full of himself, and he said, I can't handle Abraham anymore because I don't want to make myself into his student. And that's where Lot went off. Amazing. And that's where his descendants of Ruth and David fixed that up. Because I want to tell you something. Ruth, when Ruth she was a Moabite queen later on in history, and the story is that she was married to a Jewish person, and he died, and then the mother-in-law was coming back to the land of Israel, and she said to Ruth, she said, listen, why are you coming back? I have no more children, I'm an old lady, and I can't help you. Go back to your home. Go back to Moab, and don't come with me to Israel. I can't help you anymore. And you're like a Moabite queen. What are you? So Ruth says to her, no. Where you go, I go. Where you sleep, I sleep. Where you'll be buried, I'll be buried. She made herself subservient to something greater. That was the problem that Lot had. And that's even King David. I want to talk about King David a second. King David, by the way, those who read the Bible without understanding, probably the place they make the greatest mistake is King David. King David was the holiest and the greatest and the most amazing, and people misunderstand the story totally. First of all, I want to just say, for those that are listening out there, King David actually did not commit adultery. You should know that. This is besides for what the Talmud says, that King David would never have done this, but God gave him this test that was impossible for him to overcome for various reasons. And the Talmud says it was to teach an individual that even if you fall to the lowest lows, you can still fix it up and do tshuva and repent. That's what the Talmud says. So King David, first of all, on one spiritual level, for the various reasons that God moved this to give him a test he could not beat, was in order to teach the world that you could fix up when you mess up. So that's one thing. But I'll tell you something else. The actual act of adultery he didn't commit. And even though you'd say, wait a minute, the text seems to say he did. It wasn't exactly. Let me explain what it was. King David was the king. That's why he's called King David. And what happened was, there was a law in the time that when a soldier in King David's army went out to war, he would give his wife a divorce bill before he went to war. Now, why was that the law? The reason why that was the law, because if the husband got lost at battle, he was missing in action, the wife could never remarry. So what happened was that, we would know he'd be missing, and he's missing for 10, 20 years. She can't remarry. She's stuck. So what they did is they gave a discreet divorce bill. And what would happen was, when the husband came back from war, he would go and remarry his wife. So first of all, she technically was not married, Bathsheba, when King David was with her. Now, but still, it's still not right. She has a husband and this and that. Who is this guy? So the truth is, the Talmud says that the husband was what's called a Mor b'Malchus. He'd already had responded to King David in certain ways that made him obligated the death penalty. And therefore, he was gone. He was supposed to be killed. And the whole story of David, where he put them, because David didn't want to enact it, but he had the full right to kill him. He was literally called a rebellion. He started a rebellion. He was a rebellious person against the king, and therefore he was obligated a death penalty. And so when King David went and he was with Bathsheba, first of all, she was not married, and the husband was already deserving the death penalty. He was already gone. So even though he wasn't killed yet, but he was going to be. So it still was wrong. But what was it wrong? It was wrong because Hashem wanted to test David and all those different things. But people misunderstand who David was. They think David was a person who did something so bad, but they don't understand. David was the greatest. I have a question here. How is everyone here tonight? I think we're doing good. Okay. So Dan said, interesting, the divorce bill before they went to war. Yes, very interesting. Hi, William Allen. Good to see you. So that's King David. So King David was the greatest, and people misunderstand when they read the text. Not only was he the greatest, but something else about King David was he was the most humble. Could you imagine a king being humble? The law was in those days that when the rabbi would teach, he would sit on the chair, and students would sit on the floor. When King David would teach, he would sit on the floor also. And if you ever read the Bible, you'll see that King David throughout is saying, "What am I? I'm a dead dog. I'm a moth. I'm nothing." How does a person talk like that? You're the king. King David was the most humble of all people. And that's really why he became, it says, the head of the greatest. Because he was nullifying himself totally. That's the way he functioned. I'd say amazing thing here. Because, you got these stories of these this royalty and these guys doing their crazy things. And they think they're royal. And, that's not what a king is supposed to be. Let me tell you what a king is supposed to be. A king is supposed to be a slave of God. A servant of God. King David, it said he stayed up all night learning Torah, and he would stay up all night and he would doze off like this, for a few minutes at a time. And it says he kept a harp over his bed. And there's a certain point before dawn where ruach tzfonit, a northern wind would blow, and it would hit the strings of his harp, and it would arouse him, and he would take the harp, and he would sing songs to God the rest of the night. So the king said, you're a king, you're a slave. All night you're learning the Bible and the Torah, and then you're singing to God. And he wasn't embarrassed. Because the true king is someone who says that I am supposed to show that there is a greater king, a master of the universe. King David was that humble person. So what happens here? Lot is like a mixture person, because when he has the humility, then he's a student of Abraham and he becomes a righteous person. Once he becomes full of himself, he separates from Abraham. That's all fixed in his descendants, who are Ruth then. She brings out the humility, says, where you go, I go. I nullify myself, and I want to become part of this nation. And then King David, who then in the future becomes the greatest, the leader, the king, and yet the most humble of all the people. Okay, good. All right, any questions, comments, thoughts on that idea? But that is the story of the First World War, the War of the Four Kings against the Five. Now, after this, what happened was, it says that Abraham became nervous, and he started thinking to himself, you know what? First of all, I killed people. I was in a war. I killed people, and God saved me. May I use up all my merits? I don't know. I was like, okay, what I did. So God appears to him in a vision, and he says, listen, Abraham, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid that you fought this war. You have tremendous reward. Abraham says something amazing then. He says, God, what could you give me if I don't have children? Now, what did that mean? You have to understand this about Abraham, because it's hard to imagine, because we don't think this way. Well, Abraham didn't want to have kids necessarily because of the emotional fulfillment that children do give, which is, certainly a very real thing. But Abraham had a different reason why he needed to have children. And that's what we said before. Because Abraham's whole mission was to bring God into the world. And he felt if he lost that quality when he died, then is there really continuity to this mission? So God now appears to Abraham in the Bris Ben Besarim, the covenant. And he tells Abraham right now, don't worry, you will have children. Okay? You will have children, and you will become a great nation. Okay? And I will give you the land of Israel. I don't know if Rabbi Goldberg is watching now, but Rabbi Goldberg, we have to send out the itinerary for the Israel trip. Everyone's listening now. We're going to be on an Israel trip. You could still get space there in June. I will try to go in to send out all the information over. Rabbi Goldberg will also. But I'm sorry. Did I say June? I'm sorry. It's in July. I'm in July. In July, we're having an Israel trip, and people are invited. And it's going to be amazing. We're going to see incredible things, learn incredible spiritual things. So God now tells Abraham, you're going to have children, and they will get the land of Israel. Okay? Abraham then says to God, "B'meh eda, how do I know that they will inherit the land?" Okay. And God says, okay, here's how you know. Here's going to be the future. The future is going to be, is you're going to have these children, and they're going to go down to a foreign land. And in this foreign land, they are going to be enslaved and abused and beaten. But don't worry, I will bring them out from this foreign land, which is going to be the land of Egypt, and I'll bring them back to the land that I promised you, the land of Israel. That was the covenant that God made with Abraham right now. Okay? That's called a covenant of Bris Ben Masorim. And, Wendy, it's 12 p.m. in Australia. Okay, it's not so bad. It was 12 a.m. That's good. All right, welcome, Wendy. Good to see you. It's on Friday, right? Good to see you. Okay. So that was the covenant. That was a covenant God made with Abraham, that you'll have children and you'll have the land of Israel. Now, let me share something with you very, very fascinating here. The sages say that when Abraham asked God, how do I know they'll inherit the land? God said, okay, they'll be 400 years in this foreign land. It seems like God was almost punishing him for asking this question. The question is, what was the question so much? Why? And this is very important right now. Those who know the calendar, we're coming to the period called Passover. Passover is when the Jews were in Egypt, and then they come out. They're free. They come out of the land of Egypt. So the question is why did the Jews, in the first place, ever go down to the land of Egypt? Okay, I'm going to digress a second here because it is Passover time, and maybe you guys know this. I understand that God said you're going to go down to Egypt, and He'll bring us out. And we were enslaved there, and then we became free, and then we came to the land of, we got the Bible, we got the Ten Commandments in the desert, and went to the land of Israel. But why do we go to Egypt in the first place? What did we do wrong? It's a hard question. Anyone have any answers that they would like to say? Wendy or Dan or anyone, if you have any ideas, I'm happy to hear it. Anyone have an explanation of why you think the Jews had to the land of Egypt in the first place? It's an open question, guys. So feel free. It's an open discussion. Share your ideas. Again, the question is why. The story that we're about to see is that what God just promised Abraham, the Jews will go down to be a foreign land and be enslaved there, and then they'll come out, and then they'll be given the land of Israel. But I'm asking a different question. Why in the first place did they have to go to Egypt? Why didn't God just bring the land of Israel? Why get the bad stuff of being slaves? What did that do for us? Okay? So, no problem, Dan. So, all right, that's the question. So there's a lot of different answers. Let me give you some amazing ideas here. This idea is maybe the most complicated, but I think it's so deep and so beautiful. I want to share it with you. I told you guys last week that Abraham's trait was kindness. Was giving. Now, when you give to someone, if you build a relationship based on your supporting them, giving them, that's very noble. But it has drawbacks. Let's understand this. First of all, if your relationship with somebody is based on what they provide for you, it's a business relationship. It's not really more than that. You clean the house, you get dinner. So okay, so that's all I am. Then I'm a worker for you. I'm not really more than that. So that's all based on a relationship based on what you get. That's the business relationship. Let's say a relationship based on a person doing kindness. That's very good, very noble. However, there's a problem with that. What's the problem? Let's say I go and I'm nice and I give you something. I give you. Let's say one day I say, I don't want to give you any more. Do you have a complaint against me? No. Because it's all because I want to give you. And therefore, there isn't a situation in a state where I owe you anything. I'm a nice guy. I don't feel like it today, so okay, you got from me for this long, and that's enough. Right? That is the drawback of when the system works only through giving, through kindness. Abraham's trait was kindness. So when Abraham says to God, he says, listen, you said we had the land of Israel, but how do I know we're going to actually be able to maintain it? Like it's kindness, but what do we do to earn it? And that reflected that approach in Abraham. That approach in Abraham was an approach of only getting through kindness. It means we had to go through a process in Egypt where we became transformed and we were able to earn it. The process in Egypt was a very, very powerful learning experience. So, one reason we went down to Egypt was to fix ourselves up. As Abraham said in the beginning, how do I know we'll inherit the land? Means that's all because of kindness. But we need to earn something. So going to the land of Egypt was for us to be able to really earn that position. That's one reason. The reason we went down to Egypt was God was going to show the whole world the miracles through the story of Egypt. I'll give you another reason, and there's many reasons, but I'll give you another reason, and this is the Kabbalistic reason. And this is very relevant to our conversation in general. Another reason is like this, and this is the mystical reason. When Adam and Eve fell in the Garden of Eden, so all the souls were inside of them, and there was a lot of potential that was lost, went out. Okay? And now what the Jews had to do was to go to a place that had a lot of goodness in it, but it was trapped in a lot of bad, and pull out the good. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the mission today. And this is what it says in the Bible, the Jews have to be a light unto nations. What it means is that there are sparks of holiness in every place in this world. And the Jewish exile, even today, is to go to cities, go to places, and bring out that goodness. Okay? Every country, every society has a unique way to see the world, and that's something that's very special. And what happens is that when we go into those lands, it says that those sparks of holiness, those sparks that have to be redeemed, are being transformed. That's what happened in Egypt. It says that most of the sparks from Adam, when the good things that got trapped, were trapped in Egypt. And the Jews pulled them out. And that's why the mystics say there's one of the commandments is a Jew cannot go live in the land of Egypt anymore. And one of the explanations the mystics say is because what happened was that we cleaned out, the job is done in that place. You don't have to do that job anymore. The job is done. The things that we had to pull out, the holiness we had to incorporate into the grander system has been incorporated. It's a very, very deep idea, but that's also another reason why Egypt we had to go to fix up ourselves and fix up the world in that process. That happens today. Now, I want to ask you a question based on this. I have a question here from Jay. Besides of pulling out the sparks, possibly to repair any damage done beforehand, to earn the right as well as to go to Israel. Yeah, that's another reason what Jay said. Some people said that the Jews themselves, when they went to Egypt, they had made mistakes. They even fell into idolatry. Some people say they messed things up and it had to be fixed up through the process of slavery. Let me talk about that idea a second. How does that fix anything up? So this is important to know in life. In life, sometimes the challenges you go through, if you look at them right, they actually help fix you up. And you look at people who never had any difficulties. Everything's great, the guy's a star quarterback and da-da-da-da-da-da. They become very plastic. There's a certain place where the physical becomes so central to who they are, they're not really able to go into bring out the more fine things. Sometimes the challenges in life are what bring out a person's greatness. So the Jews in Egypt had to bring out their latent greatness. They had their own mistakes that they had done, And they had to bring those out, and that was why they had gone through servitude, besides for the mystical reasons that they had to then go and to fix up Egypt and fix up the world. Very good, Jay. Now, all right, so any questions, comments, thoughts? We're happy to hear it. And I'm going to keep moving along here in the story of the Bible. Okay, now, here comes some serious stuff. Wow, this is now the whole political world. Oof. So what happens now is it says that Abraham's wife Sarai could not give birth. Okay? And what happened was they had lived in the land of Israel for 10 years, and so she felt she was barren. She couldn't have children. So she said to Abraham, listen, take my handmaiden, her name was Hagar, and I want you to marry her, and she'll have children. I'll have children through her. I'll raise the children, and I'll teach them. It's like an adopted child, and that was somewhat common in those days in that sense. And that's what Sarai thought was the right thing to do because she couldn't have children. And she wanted Abraham and her to have children, but that was the fertility method, was to vicariously do it through her handmaid's name was Sarai. Her name is Hagar. Now, who is this person named Hagar? When I fix my yarmulke here, it goes the opposite way. My thing's opposite on the video. So, who is this Hagar person? She was actually an Egyptian princess. And if you remember the story I told you before, that when they went down to Egypt, then Pharaoh tried to steal Sarai. It was called Sarah eventually. And all these plagues were happening to him, and he realized something's going on. And one of his daughters saw this, Hagar, and she said, listen, these people are unbelievable. I'd rather be a handmaiden to them than be in the royal palace. So this Hagar lady was a pretty serious lady, okay? She wanted to come to be with Abraham and Sarai. And now Sarai, who's sort of trained Hagar, and Hagar has been we get the idea of slavery here, so we get the wrong picture. I mean, she was really her mentor. She totally worked for her. She was like her slave, but not in the sense where she was beating her. She was very loving to her, took care of her. And she even said, now let her go and marry my husband and I'll have a child through her. But what happened was something that's very fascinating. Abraham has relations with Hagar. And the verse says Hagar became pregnant. And when she became pregnant, she then looked down upon Sarai. The verse is Vatakel Gvirta Beinea. Her I don't know, what do you call her? Her boss, or her mentor, Sarai. Now Hagar starts saying, yeah, she's a phony. She's been married to Abram all these years, she couldn't get pregnant, and now I'm with him, and right away I get pregnant? Now once Sarai saw that, she wasn't happy. Okay? And once she saw that that Hagar started speaking badly and started putting her down, she said to Abraham, I'm angry with you. Because first of all, you did a couple things. You hear her insulting me, you're not saying anything. You're not putting her in her place. And second of all, you know why this happened? I understand now, because when you prayed to God before at the vision that we just talked about, you said, you haven't given me a child. Why didn't you say us? Abraham's like, okay. He says, listen, okay, you deal with Hagar. I mean, she's your handmaiden. You deal with her. And what Sarai did was she started to work her really hard. She tried to put her in her place. Nachmanides says this was a mistake. She did too hard. Nachmanides says has to do with a little bit in the future, where the Arab nation, who are descendants of Hagar, will do terrible things in the end of days in the land of Israel, as we're experiencing. And Nachmani says one of the reasons is because Sarai should not, she's a righteous, holy person, she had to straighten Hagar out, but she did it in too of a strong way. And that was a blemish that was done, because all the blemishes are done by the forefathers, like we're extensions of them. So they're cosmics. Like, when a baby is born, so, whatever happens in the DNA in the beginning, that's going to form the whole child. So the forefathers and foremothers, that sort of is the DNA of the future. So when Sarah goes and she's too rough on Hagar, that leads to these problems. Okay? So now what happens is that Hagar runs away. She runs away from Sarai, and an angel, according to the Talmud, a few angels, come to speak to her. And that's incredible, because now you understand what level she was on. She was like seeing angels in the house of Abraham. And she's like, we have stories later on in the Tanakh and later stories where someone saw an angel. That's where Noah, Samson's father, thought he was going to die. However you see an angel, they're not people. Have you spiritually experienced them? But Hagar is able to see it because she saw it at Abraham's house. Okay, so she goes to the angel says to her, listen, where are you going? It's I'm running away from Sarai. And the angel says, go back and subjugate yourself to Sarai, and don't worry, I will give you a child, and you'll call the child Yishmael, because God has heard your cries. Yishmael means God heard, and God heard your cries, and therefore go back and subjugate yourself to Sarah. Now, I want to just digress a second, because this is a very strong political issue right now. Yishmael, who is going to be born, and is going to have a lot of different issues happening. After Yishmael is born, there will be a point where he is going to have to be kicked out of the house. And why was that? Because later on we're going to see that when Abraham and Sarah have a child, Isaac, Yishmael was doing things that were not right. And he was shooting arrows at him, and he was doing all these things, and God says to Abraham, listen to Sarai and kick him out. Very, very difficult, but that's what happened. You're going to do what Abraham to do. So there's an interaction between Hagar and Sarai. That Sarai is the main wife, and once Hagar gets pregnant, she's like, oh, I'm the boss. Yishmael now is going to be the child that's going to be born from Hagar, and he's going to feel himself very, like Abraham's son. And Abraham loved him tremendously, Abraham's son. When Yitzchak's born, Isaac is born, he's not dealing too well with that. And that really is the root of the issue. That's the political root of the issue, of the Arab-Israeli conflict. That's really the root of it. There are other things, but that's really the root of it. In Arab teachings, they talk about instead of the binding of Isaac that Abram came to offer Isaac, they talk about it as Abram came to offer Yishmael. That's a big, obviously big difference. So there was that tension, and it says at the end of his life, Yishmael repented. He became a righteous person again. And how do you know it from the text? Because the text says at the end that when Abraham died, he was buried by his children, Yitzchak, Isaac, and Yishmael. And that was the point where Yishmael said, oh, Isaac, you're the chosen people, and I'm connected to that. And there wasn't that jealousy of like who is the chosen one. But as long as there was, that was the source of the tension. Whose land is it? Who has the holy spot in the world? It's a very amazing teaching. It says years before the Dome of the Rock was built, there was a teaching that says in one day the Arab nation would put one of their places of worship on that spot. That Temple Mount, that is the spot where Abram offered Isaac. It's the spot where where the world starts from, and it's the spot where the temple was, right? It's a spot where the high priest went into the Holy of Holies. You know, it's the holiest spot. It's the place where the heavens kiss the earth, right? That's what it says in the Zohar. It says it's the meeting point. And Ishmael kind of pushes himself in instead of recognizing his role. And that really is the challenge. That's the political challenge today. It starts right now. It starts from once Hagar becomes pregnant, she's like, I'm the one. And then Sarah pushes her. And when Nachmanides is too hard. And she runs away, and Nachmanides says, in the future, the end of days, it's going to be that they're going to cause a lot of problems for the Jewish people in the land of Israel in the future. And that comes out now. So, but Hagar is pushed to come back to her role, and she does come back to Sarah, and she says, okay, I am going to subjugate myself to you, as the angels had told her. And she does give birth to the child, and the child is called Yishmael, who is the father of the Arab nation. Okay, very good. Now, you have more time? All right, let's do one more little piece here. Now, time passes. Now, Abraham is an old man. Okay? He's 99 years old. And God appears to him and says to him, okay, you have to be pure in front of me. What's that mean? It's time to circumcise yourself. And I'm going to give you a child. Okay? And Abraham is astounded. Okay? And he says, listen, I just wish Yishmael would be righteous. And he prayed for Yishmael. And God said, that's very nice, but I'm going to give you a child that's going to come out, from you. And he tells Abraham to go and to circumcise himself, and that there will be born a child to him in the future called Isaac. And we're going to get to that next week and see what happened. But this is another one of Abraham's tests. Circumcise himself. And you have to understand what this was. Abraham right now was the person of the universalist. Everyone came to him, his tent was open. All of a sudden, this guy has circumcised himself. That's weird. The only person in the world who did it. Wasn't like today where a lot of people do this. The only person in the world. Abraham was very uncomfortable with it, the idea of doing it, because his goal was to spread godliness in the entire world. As Maimonides says, one of the functions of the circumcision, that's not the main reason, but one of the things is that it shows, it's a sign for a holy nation and for all believers too. So now all of a sudden this is a new move that's shaking things up. We're going to see Abraham does it, and then we'll see the story of how the next of the forefathers comes in the picture, who's going to be Isaac. Okay, I think I have a question here. All right, I got a few questions. I got Don, Hashem has a plan for everything, only we don't see it all or understand why. With Ishmael, we are still feeling the results of a long time ago. That's right. I once mentioned this. It's a very strange thing. It says that there's a midrash, which is, again, this is thousands of years ago, and it's a teaching that God told Moshe on Mount Sinai. It's brought in one of the texts called the Midrash Pirkei Elazar, and it says like this. It says that the name of Yishmael is one explanation, is what we just saw, that God heard her cries. God heard, right? Because she was crying and she was in a hard situation. There's another explanation. It's called Yishmael because he, in the end of days, when the problems happen right now in Israel, and we call out to God, God hears us because of the pressure He's putting on us, making us call out to God. So according to that measure, He's called Yishmael because in the future, when He causes all these terrible things, then that leads the Jews to call out to God. And I eagerly will look forward to the day when the Arab nation, is not going to take that approach, because, are a great nation, and they should should do like their forefather Ishmael and maintain that righteous approach. Hopefully that. But right now, what we have to do, as Don is asking, is that we have to do what we have to do. If a person goes and does what's right, then it's going to work out. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. You have ups and downs, but everything that happens to us is a result of what we do. And if we live righteously, then things unfold in that way. So we have to think about what we have to do. And as you said, Don, God's got a plan. And as I mentioned many times to you all, it's all going towards good. When you have hard times in life, let it be. There's an old Jewish saying, it says, let it be a kapar, let it be an atonement. A person does something wrong, and they have a problem, they make a mistake, and something happens in their lives, it's different. You say, okay, listen, I accept this, that God is making something happen challenging in the world for my ultimate good. If you look at it that way, then it's not transformative, but every negative thing you go through is actually a fixing of something in your system. I hear Dan says, a rabbi I know recently posted about a woman in India at 70 years old just had her first baby. Wow, I like that. Wow. I don't know if that was, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know if that story is, I don't know if it's a miracle or what. It depends if she was still having her period. Sarah had lost her period. We're going to see next time. And then she got it back. So I don't know what that is. I mean, that's fascinating. But certainly for Abraham and Sarah, it wasn't just like a freak of nature. It was really impossible. She was on a period. All these things. It was not possible, and it was through a miraculous process. And we'll explain why it had to be like that. Very, very fascinating. But we'll see you all next week at 8:30 for more exciting discussions from Genesis. All right. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.